Question number 9, Metiria Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou e te whare. My question is to the Minister for Social Development and asks, does she believe that the Ministry of Social Development has a responsibility to treat unemployed people, solo parents and people with disabilities with respect and dignity, and ensure every person on a benefit has all the support they are entitled to?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I believe the Ministry should treat everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of whether they're on a benefit or not.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does she think that her ministry lives up to this standard, given the hundreds of examples made public this week describing denigrating and obstructive responses by WINS deliberately denying people their entitlements?
The
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I've travelled all over New Zealand and been into WINS offices and talked with staff. I have never met anyone yet who isn't absolutely passionate about helping people get back on their feet, get into work and live successful lives.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Given that a recent study into grandparents seeking financial support has found that, quote, the service standards published by Work and Income are continually breached, not displayed in offices and are not subject to a complaints procedure, end quote, will she commit to changing the punitive culture in WINS so that it focuses on giving people the help when they need it?
The Honourable Anne
Mr
Tolley.
Speaker, the benefit that the member is referring to is the unsupported orphans benefit, I think is the name of it. And there are procedures that do take a long time to process, determining whether or not a child is in the full care of a grandparent. And I've met with the grandparents raising grandchildren on a number of occasions. What I can say to the member is that this issue in particular is being addressed through the Ministry for Vulnerable Children, Oranga Tamariki, which focuses on the needs of the child and therefore will enable much better support, I believe, to be able to be wrapped around any people who are taking care of those children and in particular grandparents.
Supplementary question, Sarah Dowie.
To the Minister, what recent actions have the Ministry of Social Development taken to ensure people do receive the support they are entitled to?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
We have been working our way through a number of issues to ensure that the practice aligns with the legislation and that people do receive their full entitlements. For example, one issue that was identified was a coding error, which meant some clients were being paid the accommodation supplement at the wrong rate. When this was discovered, MSD took the appropriate action to reimburse 22,000 current clients at around $14 million and undertook to identify previous clients who may have been underpaid. MSD is absolutely committed to ensuring that people get the support that they're entitled to.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
When WINS tells 85% of grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren that they are not entitled to benefits that they should in fact be receiving, will she instruct WINS to review every case to ensure every single person on a benefit is receiving their full entitlement?
The Honourable
Mr Speaker, I'm not aware of where that figure comes from. If it comes from a survey that was done recently, then I would question the assertion that that relates to all grandparents. As I've said, there is a process by which WINS has to be satisfied that the grandparent now has the full care and responsibility for the child. And that does cause, from time to time, some lengthy delays. And so, as I say, this has been raised with me by a number of occasions by the organisation representing those grandparents, and we are addressing it as best we are able.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
When so many stories of people being driven into poverty and despair by the broken welfare system have emerged in this last week, will she instruct MSD to hold an amnesty for every current beneficiary.
Order.
So, for every current beneficiary, so not me, Minister, so that they can talk to WINS about...
Order. Would the member complete her question? It's a very long question.
So that they can talk to WINS about their full entitlements without risking investigation or financial punishment.
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
First of all, I reject the assumption that the social welfare system this country so proudly has is broken. In fact, on the contrary, I would say the results that the people working very hard throughout New Zealand, which have shown a record number of people coming off reliance on a benefit and into work. 60,000 children in New Zealand now no longer live in houses dependent on a benefit. And I think that is a huge success for this country and a huge success for the people that are now living totally independent lives, able to support themselves and their families.
In cars.
Order.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Why will the Minister not hold an amnesty for current beneficiaries when she cannot guarantee that every parent on a benefit has enough money to feed their kids and pay their power bills this winter without having to ask for extra assistance?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I think the member forgets that this government was the first government in over 40 years to raise the amount of monies paid to beneficiaries. The first government in 40 years. There is no doubt, Mr Speaker, that it is difficult to manage on a benefit. But that is why the staff at Work and Income work so hard with families to help them into sustainable employment, because the best way out of poverty is to be self-reliant, to be independent and to be able to be working in New Zealand supporting their own families.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
How many beneficiaries are currently homeless?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I suggest the member puts that down in a written question.
Given she doesn't
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Given the Minister does not know how many current beneficiaries are homeless, how can she agree with the use of financial sanctions to threaten the poorest people in New Zealand with worsened poverty?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, sanctions are only ever applied after several warnings and only applied when people do not comply with their obligations. And some of those obligations are very simple. They are turning up for an appointment. If there is a good reason, the sanction's not applied. It is very easy for people to re-comply, but there have to be some accountabilities when you are spending taxpayers' money.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Why does the Minister believe that it is okay for the government to use poverty as a weapon against solo mums and their children, disabled people and homeless people who have already lost everything?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Well, Mr Speaker, I completely refute the assertions of that member.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
How many people on a benefit have committed suicide in the last 5 years?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I don't believe that MSD ever has collected those sorts of statistics.
Question number 10, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question